103.5 FM, the Haven's home for community radio. This is Mubaraka Ibrahim, and this is Mornings with Mubaraka, where we talk about national issues from local level through a lens of diversity. I want to welcome you to the show today. Today is a beautiful Wednesday morning in Connecticut. It is so gorgeous outside. Like, this is the weather that I really love. I just need it to last long. I'm hoping that because we had a super long winter, that we'll have a super long summer as well. All right? So, we are... There we go. So, I'm trying not to yell over the music. So I want to welcome you to the show, and we're going to talk about some small political wins. When I thought about doing this show, I was thinking to myself, I've been trying to take a fast from the news, but then every so often you can't just stick your head inside the sand. So every so often I kind of peep out. I'm like, no, going back. No, going back. But every so often when you peep your head out, you get a little bit of good news, a little bit. So we got to celebrate our small wins right now. That's my philosophy. Let's celebrate a small win that's actually not so small. So today we are welcoming Janet Alfano, who is the executive director of the Diaper Bank of Connecticut, to the show. Welcome, Janet. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So what is our small win that we are celebrating here in Connecticut? We are celebrating a tax exemption. And it may seem like a small thing, but it's actually a really big thing. And we're going to talk about it. And Janet is going to explain to us why this is so important. So as of July 1st, the state of Connecticut joins only a handful. I think we're only the fifth state, right?
Yes.
We're the fifth state in the entire country who has a tax exemption for diapers and women's sanitary products. And that actually is a big win for us. So I wanted to just really quickly talk a little bit about why is this, let's just talk about the history of kind of how this came about.
Sure. Yeah, it's great to start there. I was going to suggest it actually for folks who don't know, diapers for adults and children, both reusable and disposable diapers, were actually, prior to 2010-11, had a tax exemption under the clothing exemption. If you recall, the clothing exemption, clothing under $50 was tax exempt, and there were varying amounts of the limit on the clothing items. But up till that point, it was exempted under the clothing exemption. And around that time, when the state was trying to figure out how to fill a significant budget gap, that clothing exemption was taken away. Now, the diapers or incontinence products for adults became exempted under a medical exemption at that time. But both disposable and reusable diapers for children became taxable at that time. And so from then until now, these items have been taxable. Right. And so in about and around 2015, there was a bill introduced to try and exempt diapers at that time, and it did not go through. And then again in 2016. And at that time, after having several bills for both diapers and feminine hygiene and a combined bill to exempt both of those items, it ended up getting through during the budgetary process.
During 2015 or 2016?
2016.
2016. It got through the budgetary process of 2016.
To take effect. July 1st, 2018.
Yes. So we are 11 days in.
11 days in.
That means that everybody who's going out this month, so it's not like you can avoid it and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy none this month. Right?
Exactly.
So everybody's going out this month.
There's no break from
Right. There is no break. So when we think about, the first thing that I started reading when I kind of read some of the articles and the comments, and the interesting thing, so let me backtrack.
Sure.
The interesting thing before I go to some of the comments is that this is something that I'm finding that is actually taken an effect not just in America, but I found there are women in the UK who's fighting for this.
Yep.
People in Canada actually just passed theirs, and they start this summer as well. So this is not just an American thing. Why do you think that there was this kind of like idea of we should be taxed as women for this very necessary thing? Where does that come from besides the patriarchy?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think it's exactly as you said. What I do think is important is that the momentum is around changing it, right? And so that is really significant. And we've seen that over the past few years where, we're talking about these issues more. We're talking, of course, about diapers and basic needs for children. We're also talking about feminine hygiene, period supplies, period products. And we're being more open about those kinds of things and what it actually means not to have access to those, the significant barriers it can have for young women attending school, both here and in other countries around the world. So I think that, the momentum is around changing it. There's probably lots of reasons around patriarchy and other things that contribute to why it was in place. But what we know is the momentum is to change it, and really the right thing to do is to change it.
And so the diaper bank was a part of this advocacy for changing this law. How did that process work for you guys? Like, was it difficult going and talking to lawmakers?
Yeah, so we certainly reached out, and we had varying levels of, I will say, interest in changing this. Certainly our focus is on those who are in the most diaper need, which is our priority focus, but we do actually offer feminine hygiene as well as part of a new project. What we are focused on are those most in need. However, this was an easier way to convince folks to care about this issue, and so we see it as a first step, but certainly folks didn't even really want to hear about this. So we had reached out to a few folks, and then we had really a young champion legislator on our side out of Manchester, Kelly Julison Scopino. She was Kelly Luxembourg at the time. And she reached out to us to say, hey, do you know about this diaper tax issue? And I said, yes, we do, and we're really looking to change it. And she was raring to go. So she was really instrumental and persuasive to her colleagues in the legislature to actually work harder. But certainly this had a lot of support, and our New Haven delegation was very supportive as well.
Oh, awesome. When we talk about just the tax on feminine hygiene products, let's talk about the populations that it affect the most. So give us some stats on that.
Sure. So for us, that's a newer issue to be engaged in and around. Certainly, we know that it impacts poor and low-income families the most. A significant population of folks who have housing insecurity, who are homeless. If you can imagine the difficulty in accessing products and the lack of really basic human decency that not having access to this would have a person deal with on a regular basis. Certainly it's something that is so basic that it should be available to folks in public spaces. I mean, certainly I would love to see access to feminine hygiene anywhere that has facilities.
I think that it's really interesting to see the young people who have championed for this. We had actually, it was actually pretty cool. So everybody knows I'm a social media head, right? And it was a viral video actually went around, maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, because a group of young men in Hill House High School started.
So great.
Wasn't that awesome?
It was so incredible.
So I didn't finish my sentence for people who didn't hear or didn't see it. A group of young men in Hill House High School actually collected sanitary napkins to add to so they can be available for girls in school. And I thought that was one, it shows such empathy on their part. And it was such a great advocacy for them as guys, because it's a really hard thing. Because we were actually just talking when I mentioned what the show is about. The gentleman who was in the room was like, "Oh, I'm getting ready to go." Like I can't hear the sanitary talk, right?
Right.
Even though he had a daughter,
Right.
right. So I think that it shows such empathy. I love seeing that, particularly among the young generation.
Yeah.
It gives you so much hope for the
sure.
change, cultural change in our society.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean that was so inspiring. I mean, that was so inspiring to me personally, but as an individual woman. But as someone who's running an organization that's helping to provide basic needs, I mean, I was in my office and I saw that story and I just did a little shout out in my own office. But it's wonderful to see, and it's inspiring. And if you think about, a generation prior to those folks who would not even consider doing something like that and would, I think you've seen folks be part of ridicule or just a lack of awareness about folks who are in need of that very basic item. So it's wonderful. It was so wonderful to see. And certainly we are a new supplier of that in a partnership with the National Diaper Bank Network, the Alliance for Period Supplies. And so we're just getting started with that particular program, and we're excited to offer it. We had a little bit of work around feminine hygiene products in some of our work with the New Haven Moms Partnership. And so my distribution manager and I would go to the local BJ's and get pallets and fill them up with feminine hygiene products. And you can imagine no one from the store will be trying to sell you anything or talk to you with a whole pallet full of feminine hygiene.
Like, wow.
Yeah, like what's going on here?
What are you doing with all those? Right? Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah. So yeah, certainly it's that was inspiring to see, and it's inspiring as someone who is over 40 to see the young people taking this on in such a dramatic and wonderful way.
So tell me a little bit about the project and effort that the National Diaper Bank is making in this. Are you so for people who are not familiar, the National Diaper Bank supplies diapers for low-income families and families who can't afford them, and we're definitely going to talk about that the second half of the show because that's such an important issue. But with the new project of feminine hygiene, what are some of the goals around that project?
Just certainly making those items more available to folks in need, and we are lucky to be part of the national network, and as part of that Alliance for Period Supplies, and the national network partners with Kimberly-Clark for diapers, as well as the feminine hygiene products. You by Kotex is actually offering some donations of that product to our program as well as others around the country. Certainly we're hoping to make them more available. For our program, we are really starting a bit slowly just to make sure that we are able to start a program that we can sustain and make sure that we're doing it in the right way and learning from folks who've already been doing that work. So for us, we are the newbies in this, but we look to others who have established programs and look to do some surveying of our existing partners to see what is the need that they're seeing with the families that they're serving. And then are there new partners that we think would benefit from this as well? And certainly we know that would be the case. So we're taking baby steps, but we're really looking forward to helping families meet more of their basic needs, especially the basic hygiene.
I think that one of the reasons why I thought that doing this show was so important is because often in the privilege of living in America, we see videos of young girls in Africa who can't afford, who don't go to school for a week out of every single month, missing education because they don't have feminine hygiene products. And we look to places like India, and we think that here in America, in our privilege, like, oh, everybody can afford this, but there are people who have to actually choose sometimes between buying their baby's diapers and their own sanitary products.
That's right.
And I think that's important for people to actually realize that's a real struggle for some people.
Yeah, we hear that anecdotally, that truly exists. We hear countless stories on that very trade-off for families to say, all right, either I'm going to purchase diapers for my baby or feminine hygiene, or I'm going to look to get feminine hygiene from a family member or a friend, or, I think as a woman, I will say we've all had that moment when we did not have the supplies that we needed, whether or not we could afford them. Maybe we've been in a situation where, oh, that wasn't necessarily expected to be happening right now. And so think about that when you know you don't have access to the supplies that you need in order to attend school or to leave your home. It's truly a difficulty. What we're hoping to do with our project is participate in some of the research around that, so that while we hear what's going on anecdotally, we can have more data to back that up, to actually help put some research behind the need, and then hopefully get some funding to be able to provide more of a supply to those in need.
When you there's no research so far, like, I mean, probably surveys, but there's no
some,
kind
there's
of
none that we've done, and again, we're newbies in this space, so there's some out there. Certainly we'll be looking to that, and then doing our own research in the communities that we serve to see what the need is and how we can best support it and meet the need.
Okay. So some of the interesting things, I always like to give people kind of like some stats around feminine hygiene, or around whatever our show is particularly about. And today we're talking about feminine hygiene. So I found a really interesting article from taxfoundation.org. So on taxfoundation.org, and you can find the link if you're interested in reading the whole article. You can find a link on the Facebook page. In 2016, at least 13 states and districts of Columbia considered proposal to exempt feminine hygiene products from the state sales tax. Ultimately, Connecticut, Illinois, New York, and the District of Columbia adopted the proposed exemption. So we are actually one of only 4. So out of 13 states, that's kind of sad that 13 states considered it and only 4 adopted. That's kind of sad. Of the 45 states which imposed statewide sales tax, 7, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, specifically exempt feminine hygiene products from the sales tax base. No state assesses a special or unique tax on feminine hygiene products. So either it's taxed or it's not.
Right.
There's like, so, but the exemption of feminine hygiene products is a part of a broader trend of shrinking state sales tax base. Smaller sales tax bases lead to higher overall tax rates. So that's one of the complaints about we've taken this. So I didn't find the stats or predictions for Connecticut in particular, but I did find some information in California that the complaint behind it was that by not taxing feminine hygiene, they were taking $40 million from the tax budget. So how did you talk to legislators to convince them that, hey, we have to take this, we're going to take this from the tax budget?
Yeah, so for Connecticut, the feminine hygiene component was around a little over $3 million.
Okay.
So I would say that states make choices on things that they spend money on.
Sure.
We call it, and it can be on the tax side, it can be on the expenditure side. We can also look at it that the state has been making $3.2 million a year off of taxing basic needs for women. For diapers, it was about $4.3 million. And that was for about 7 years. So while I understand that this is part of a revenue stream, there are also significant other revenue streams that could be used to help fill the budgetary gap. These are basic hygiene needs. And for a state like ours to have to consider them in the revenue stream, I think says something about our priorities as a state. And so I understand the significant fiscal issues that we have as a state. There has to be another way aside from taxing these basic needs that families have to purchase.
Right.
They don't have an option.
Because it certainly is like being taxed for being a female.
Right.
Because it's not like you can not have it.
Right.
So
You can't opt out.
Right.
You don't have that.
Don't have that. Not without some serious medical intervention.
That's right. That's right.
And nobody's giving out free hysterectomies.
No.
So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. This is Mornings with Mubaraka, your Wednesday morning voice, and we are talking about the new tax exemption for sanitary hygiene items and diapers here in Connecticut that took effect July 1st. And with us to discuss this important tax exemption, a small win in our politics, is Janet Stelfani from the Diaper Bank of Connecticut. So, Janet, this tax exemption was paired with diapers.
Mm-hmm.
Were they paired together because it was easier? They complemented each other, and it's easier to get them both passed in one swoop, get more bang for your buck.
Yeah. So it was really interesting. Initially in 2015, when the legislature first was introduced, we had a separate bill. And then the next year, when we were strategizing about, well, how do we best do this? The folks from the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women, which is now the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors, they reached out to say, let's figure out how we can work together. And we really did have a lot of discussion around, should we have a bill introduced separately or together? And ultimately, we did both. So there ended up being 2 bills to exempt diapers introduced, 2 bills to introduce feminine hygiene, and a combined bill that exempted both items. And that was, for us, our goal. We weren't really sure what was going to happen given the financial situation in the state of Connecticut. What we really hoped was to have at least 2 public hearings to get this heard in front of a different audience. For us on the diaper side, we certainly felt strongly about making sure that we had a hearing in public health, because prior to that it was in the Children's Committee, which was great, but we also wanted to have it in public health because we felt really strongly that this is a health issue. It's a basic needs issue. It impacts health of both women and children. And so we wanted to ensure that those folks in that committee heard it. And so we were successful there. And so we felt like that was a win in and of itself. Ultimately, the bills got passed through their initial committees and would have all had to be referred to the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. None of the bills actually were voted out of that committee. What ended up happening is during the budget process, the representative that I talked about, Kelly Luxembourg at the time, said, I'll vote for this budget as long as we ensure that the exemption for both diapers and feminine hygiene products stays in the budget. And so, it was down to the wire. And when I got the call, certainly it was thrilling to hear. And since then, we've basically been holding our breath to ensure that this stays in the budget, given the last year budget problem.
And it did.
Awesome. And it did.
And it did. Awesome.
It did. So we'll take it. Right. We'll have that 1 minute of hooray and then right back to work.
All right. Absolutely. One of the things that I think that is that's interesting about both of these tax exemptions is that it's broader implications. If you think of people who can't afford diapers, who can't afford sanitary napkins, and how those are so essential to every other part of their lives, right? So whether you have to leave work early, whether your kid end up getting a diaper infection because they're not being changed often enough, which will cause you to miss work. Right. So it really is a snowball effect. And sometimes we don't think about how these small things, we think about bigger issues like, let's get women paid equally, which is an important and big issue. Yes. And let's make sure we have jobs, which is an important and big issue. But when we talk about quality of life and how it affects, one of one of the more profound things that I've heard, particularly around diapers and affordability of diapers, is Megan from the Moms Partnership. Yes. She did a presentation for that annual Head Start Day and
Yes.
luncheon, and in their working with moms,
Right.
she mentioned that when they looked at the correlation between postpartum depression, it didn't. The strongest correlation was with whether or not the mom could afford diapers.
Right.
So not even how many kids they had, whether they
Right.
had postpartum depression prior to
Mhm.
their marital status or
Mhm.
relationship status. None of those things exceeded whether or not they could provide diapers for their kids.
That's right. So you're talking about Dr. Megan Smith, and while we always knew that obviously this is a stressor, certainly having that research to back it up and understanding how high the correlation was between maternal stress and diaper need
Mm.
was even eye-opening for those of us who are doing the work. And certainly that research was incredibly important and profound and underscored the need for services like ours for the health and well-being of children, but also for the health and well-being of moms.
Absolutely.
And you can imagine being a mom, being a new mom, and not being able to meet a very basic need for your child. What does that do for your own feeling of self-worth and then your ability to actually engage and bond with your child during those most pivotal developmental years for the child? So we were certainly grateful for that research with the Moms Partnership and the National Diaper Bank Network. And diaper banks across the country look to elevate the issue of diaper need in their communities because of that research. And we certainly are looking at that as well. We were fortunate enough as part of, in collaboration with, I should say, the National Diaper Bank Network, to participate in a research study or really an economic analysis of our organization. And it looked at the magnifying impacts of our work, and what it found, which was quite interesting to us, through the work of the Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis at UConn Business School. It looked at, for every dollar that you invest in the Diaper Bank of Connecticut, there's about an $11 return.
Wow.
And they looked at things like ability to stay in work and earnings over the course of a number of different years. But they also looked at some other impacts as well, which was incidence of diaper rash. So it found that by us providing diapers, it actually reduced the incidence of diaper rash by about a third, which was really interesting to us, and that we are serving those most in need. At about 60% of the families that we're serving live not just in poverty, but at or below $20,000 a year of income. And so, we certainly had a sense that we're working with those most in need, but even seeing that number, if you can imagine, living off of that for a family of 3 or 4 is really honestly
For one person to live off of that in Connecticut is
that's right.
poverty.
really in any area within the state would
yeah.
be difficult. And then one of the other things that we looked at that we've heard anecdotally and that we hear from our partner agencies when we survey them is that, folks missing work if they didn't have access to diapers. So their ability to attend work or school has been enhanced because of receiving diapers from our organization. So, there's a growing body of research and surveying around diaper need that some of our colleagues around the country have been doing, and certainly we're happy to have participated in the way that we have with this economic analysis. And we know that other diaper banks are using it to actually elevate the issue of diaper need. In California, I don't know if you have been following, they actually recently put $10 million in their budget to provide diapers. And they have a
So the state legislator put
their state legislature
wow.
put $10 million in for diaper banks. Through
All right, Connecticut, you hear that?
On my little notes for today, I'm throwing it out there.
I'm throwing it out. Hint,
Throwing it out there.
Hint, hint, state reps and senators.
When we look at what we choose to spend money on as a state, we certainly see initiatives toward businesses that generate jobs, that grow the economy. And this organization, the Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis, is frequently the body that actually looks at economic impact for industry. And a few times in its history, it's looked at nonprofits and what their, the economic impact that they have. And so for us, we say, when you look at industries, when you look at companies, and companies get incentives and grants to grow their businesses. We feel like this is not only a basic need, but we've seen from this economic impact the magnifying effect that it can have on growing the economy. I would love to employ more folks and distribute more diapers to families in need. We know that there's about 50,000 children aged 0 to 3 that live at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And so we know that there's
children in Connecticut.
In Connecticut alone. We know that there's more work to do and that we can be meeting more of the need because our model is, tested and tried and true, and been replicated throughout the country. So we feel like this is just as an important investment as some of these larger companies who are doing great work, but we know that ours is certainly vital.
Absolutely. Because you're going to supply people with jobs, but if they don't have a quality of life that allows them to get to that job, then that becomes an issue, not just for the job, but also for the employer, right? So if you're an employer and, a third of your workforce is calling out on, at least once a week, that's a huge issue for you as an employer.
That's right.
And it's hard to justify kind of even hiring people who you feel like, oh, they're not going to be consistent or they're going to call out. It affects the company itself. So I think looking at quality of life issues in particular is something that is overlooked, but I think we're getting to a point where we're looking at it more and we're understanding the impact to things like that. But we're definitely something that has to be, I think, not just among nonprofits, but the legislation has to look at how we can pass legislation that's going to increase quality of life issues because, it affects everything else.
It does. It really does.
Sure.
And I would add, we're a small employer. We're a staff of 3. But I would put out there as an employer, you have a responsibility to your employees, your staff, to provide a high enough income that they are able to provide the basic needs for themselves and their family. And it's not necessarily easy to do in the climate that we're in, but it's necessary and it's better for the economy as a whole, for your employees, for your organization. There are definitely studies around about that, which I can't cite at the moment, but
that goes. We know that it's there because that goes to this push for $15 an hour minimum wage.
That's right. That's right. And if you are an organization who's advocating for social justice, fairness, and equity, you need to live it within your own workforce.
Absolutely.
So I feel really strongly about that.
I completely agree. And it's difficult, and sometimes it may mean making necessary sacrifices. But I know in my mind, it would be better to supply a good quality of life for 80 employees than to have 100 employees living at poverty.
Absolutely.
So it's like you are making choices.
That's right.
And sometimes they are difficult choices, but I think there is a responsibility. We have both a social and moral responsibility. And in the end, is the long-term impact of economic impact, social impact, quality of life impact on long-term makes a huge, huge difference. Because our society is made up of individuals, and so we have to take care of people individually in order to better our entire society and communities, for sure.
Yeah, and we know that the families that we serve certainly make very difficult choices in terms of how they spend their time, how they spend their money. Impossible choices, quite frankly, on food, diapers, hygiene supplies, you name it. So they are extraordinarily difficult choices.
Tell people who may not be aware some of the work the Diaper Bank does. How can people who are listening may need access to diapers?
Sure. So how we work is we actually partner with organizations that are already serving low-income families in Greater New Haven and throughout the state of Connecticut. We have about 55 or so partners, and they range from childcare facilities to home visiting programs, shelter-based programs, a wide range of faith-based organizations. And we provide diapers to them to meet the needs of their clients on a monthly basis. And they do it in a variety of ways. in ways that best suits the needs of the families that they're serving and also what their organization already does. You know, we wanted to ensure that we didn't want to set up a new set of distribution partners, but rather look to the places where families are already going to get other things, other needs, or where they have a trusted relationship within the community.
Give us some examples of some of those partners.
Sure. So in New Haven, for instance, we work with Junta, we work with Iris, New Reach, All Our Kin, Youth Continuum, Mount Bethel, Missionary Baptist Church. I'm sorry for anyone in New Haven that I didn't give a shout out to, but we have a lot of partners in New Haven. That's our greatest concentration.
For people in New Haven who are listening, if you need diapers, you can go to any of those organizations and express that need.
Actually, the best bet would be to reach out to us directly, because what we would try to do is match what need they might have already with a partner. So, for instance, if someone is not necessarily in need of assistance because they're housing insecure, we probably wouldn't refer them to New Reach. We would find another partner that matched another need that they might have. Or connect them to another partner that's more kind of an open partner, like a Mount Bethel church.
All right. And there are how many diaper banks throughout the United States?
I think we're in the 200 to 300 range. And they're of varying sizes. Some are just getting started. Some have been around for a few years. There's probably about, I would say, less than 20 who are distributing over 1 million diapers a year or more, somewhere in that area. But that this need is in every community. We know that the need is not being met everywhere in the United States. And so, because we know that folks aren't making enough to make ends meet. And there are a host of other issues that folks have. But we know that we can meet more of the need, and it needs support from folks in the state of Connecticut as well as other places around the country. And certainly the National Diaper Bank Network is leading the advocacy and public awareness about these issues across the country and helping diaper banks like ours meet this need in their own communities with supplies of diapers, period products, but also really technical assistance, advocacy. You know, we can strategize together and learn from each other in terms of the other members of the network, and we certainly do that. We also participate in national efforts like Diaper Need Awareness Week, which this year, I believe it's the September 24th, the week of September 24th. So diaper banks across the country will be just highlighting this issue and holding events and social media blasts around the issue as well.
So what the question I want to remember to ask you is, you partner with organizations to supply diapers. So with this new effort of bringing it back to include the hygiene items, do you partner with those same organizations to distribute hygiene items?
Yeah. So for right now, we're just starting out, and our plan is to start with some of our existing partners, just because we have relationships with them, and it will be easy to add something new, another product, and they can find the need. Certainly, our hope eventually is to expand that out if we're able to, increase our supply and donations of that. We're starting slowly, intentionally, because certainly our primary focus right now is diaper need, and we haven't met that in our state, and so we feel like there's work to be done.
Right.
And while we can celebrate this tax victory, we're really proud of that work. We know that there's a lot more work to be done.
All right, awesome. So tell people. So we have about 5 more minutes to the show. Tell people how they can get in touch with the Diaper Bank.
Sure. So you can reach us. We have a website. It's www.thediaperbank.org.
The Diaper Bank, because I always miss that. You got to put THE in front of that. You do. The Diaper Bank.
Otherwise, you'll end up with our colleagues in Arizona. We love them, but they can't meet the need in Connecticut. And then give us a call, 203-934-7009. Extension 111 would be the best number if you're looking for diapers, and you can be directed to, if you want to talk to me or our distribution manager. Certainly we can help you out. We always have a lot of things going on in order to raise more funds to provide more diapers. So we do have an event coming up on September 13th, Rock Your Baby. for folks who've attended, as you have in the past.
Okay, yes.
It's at Amaranti's from 6 to 10. We're always looking for folks to come to support our work, sponsor.
Is that the same week of diaper awareness?
It's actually a little bit before,
Okay.
but we'll talk a little bit about Diaper Need Awareness Week at the event this year.
Okay.
So stay tuned. But
And we'll have you back before then and to talk
Wonderful.
about it.
Wonderful. That would be great. Folks can support us by doing diaper drives as well, which is a great community event for like a Girl Scout troop or a school group or a faith-based organization. So we have a lot of support from organizations like that to help us meet more of the need.
Okay. All right. So you guys, you heard how you can get involved, how important this is. So there's about 45 states that has work to do. So if you are not from Connecticut, Maryland, Illinois, or New York, you got some work to do.
That's right.
You can take all of the, just Google tax exemption for hygiene products, tax exemption for diapers, and you'll have a lot of examples and to bring to your legislation. Right. I know this morning I gave a full Twitter rant on how important it is to get involved in local politics. And this is a part of it because what's passed on the state and local level is what's going to affect us directly.
That's right.
Right? So the federal stuff affects us, and that stuff is important. But your daily, everyday quality of life is going to be immediately affected by our state and local government. So it's really important for you to get involved. That's right. We are coming towards the end of the show, and I want to thank everybody for listening. I also want to give you a heads up for next week. So we are this next few weeks, I am all kind of like quality of life issues and quality of life issues for different populations. So next week we have Mr. Jerry Smart actually coming to talk to us about health care for the reentry population, which is a really, really fascinating topic to me because it's something that we don't think about. And it's really a population that's just kind of like discarded. Really, like you come out of prison, it's like, okay, they're out of prison, we're gonna wait and see what you're gonna do. Right? They don't think of people, we don't think just in general as a society about some of their needs. And Mr. Smart works with the Yale Department of Psychiatry to make sure that prisoners who are coming or former prisoners are getting health care when they return home. And that's a really important issue. So thank you so much for joining me, Janet.
Thank you for having me.
This was a really enlightening conversation. I think that is such an important issue. And I'm so glad that the Diaper Bank, along with, and I have to learn her name because she was our champion in the legislation. Tell us her name again.
It's Kelly Julison Scopino.
Okay, we want to give a shout out to Kelly Julison Scopino and thank her for being our champion inside of the Connecticut legislature.
Yes. Along with many others.
Along with many others.
Yes, please. I don't want to slight
anyone. For all of you who championed, who championed for us with the Diaper Bank and Kelly and all of the people who advocated for this. So it's going to make a really big difference. Both of these are going to make a really big difference in a lot of people's lives because 95% of parents use disposable diapers. I looked that statistic up because I was like, well, are people starting to gravitate to cloth diapers? There's a movement, but still 95% of parents actually use, and about 100% of women under 40 use feminine hygiene products. And it's really interesting because I found one stat, which we know as women, is that you spend about 40 years of your life every month buying feminine hygiene products. And that little bit of extra tax adds up over a lifetime.
Absolutely. Right?
How many other things could you have done with, you know, the $50,000 or however much money that you're going to be saving from not having to pay taxes on something that you need simply because you're a woman. And we're half the population.
That's right.
Hello, we got a little bit of pool, just a little bit. We half the population.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much for Janet for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. You've been listening to Mornings with Mubarak on WNHHLP 103.5 FM. I'm here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And I'm going to remind you to go about your week to be a voice and not an echo.
It's really good.